Hello once again everybody, and welcome to more sim racing action here on caterhamracer.com, here on YouTube and also on Facebook as well. You're watching here for the final race in this inaugural series of the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series, and what you're seeing here is the end of our kind of our first race for Grid B. Here's the schedule once again tonight, where you'll be able to see the second race for Grid B, which will give the top drivers outside the top 18 pre-qualifying for a chance to head onto the grid for the two Grid A races later on. And after that, they'll be starting at the back of the grid, whoever wins that race. And then it'll be two 15-minute races to close out the first season. What's been 6 very frantic races, the 7th one coming up, and it should be all action once again. Scott Woodwiss and Chris Hutchinson here once again. I'm sure Chris will jump in when he's ready to do so. I know he's quite busy with quite a few things before we get underway, but we are watching the final lap here of the first Grid B race, with James Fowler leading the way from Emil Giselink, who I believe is either Dutch or Belgian, or one of the two, but he has jumped in as one of our newcomers and is immediately fairly on the pace in Grid B in second place. But the man he's going to go on to win race number 1 is going to be James Fowler, third in last year's Academy, but first across the line here at Oulton Park to win the first race. So that effectively only really sets the grid for the second race, and it's that race which everyone needs to aim for when it comes to taking race victory, because there's only one promotion spot into Grid A for the rest of the evening. Jeff Newman has scored a third place from Dominic Mansberger, one of this year's 2020 Academy drivers. Ben Buckley will come across the line in 5th ahead of Rob Oldland, another one of our 2020 drivers. We've got Darren Holdcroft and Jim Earlham. Mike Hilton was in the pit lane, and we've sadly lost Philip Clark and Trevor Conway, and Erkan Bax is unfortunately fairly down the order as well, possibly about a lap or so, but he has managed to come across the line. So, Oulton Park International Circuit is in business tonight. It is the full layout. It's usually very much a driver's favourite. Lots of fast undulations, sweeps and dips. It is a fantastically beautiful circuit, both to drive and to admire as it winds its way through the Cheshire countryside. And the man who managed to do that best of everyone in this first race is James Fowler. He managed to win by 3.3 seconds from the Belgian Emil Giselink, then Jeff Newman and Dominic Mansberger 4th, Ben Buckley 5th, then Rob Oldland, Dennis Erkenbachs, Darren Holdcroft, Jim Earlham and Mike Hilton was the top 10 in that race. And then we had Trevor Conway and Philip Clark. I mentioned this result of this first race, as it does in Grid A, will set the grid in order for race 2. So James Fowler will have pole position and will be looking to pick up another race victory, and that will certainly put him back where he feels he'll belong, and he'll hopefully be able to get in with a few drivers who may be racing tonight, particularly his fellow graduates from the top 3 of the Caterham Academy white group, such as Blair McConaughey and the eventual champion Tom Willis. And of course, all the usual suspects will expect to be there, like Harry Senior and David Rowe and James Murphy, and also Matthew Lewis, Steve Arnell, Paul Fernerhuff, Steve McMaster and like. So things are just gridding up now for race number 2. Cars popping onto the screen, so once they're all set and ready in position, the red lights will come on, and that is Chris's catering, but of course he's sat at the pits because he is directly what you're seeing on screen, and what you are seeing on screen is that man right there, James Fowler, in the silver Caterham with the black nose and the orange roll bar, but alongside him in the bright blue machine, the Belgian Emil Giselink from Belgium. And then just a couple of cars are waiting to pop onto the grid. We're waiting for our 4th placed car to head. That must be Dominic. I thought it might be Dominic Mansberg, but that might be him on the left-hand side in third place.
Hi Scott, and hi everybody. I think Dominic might have had a disconnect, so I'm not sure whether he's going to be able to join us for this second race. Unfortunately, he had a bit of an issue halfway through that race. I think he got back in, but nevertheless, I think that's where the gap comes. But we have got a field here of, so I think it's 10 cars.
It looks like it, yes. I mean, that's unfortunate that we've lost Dominic, if that is the case, but unfortunately in sim racing that is one of the pitfalls, that you can have connection issues and unfortunately drop out of whichever server you're racing in.
It's a bit like a mechanical, isn't it, Scott? It's like that kind of thing. It's unfortunate when it happens, but it does.
Well, I always used to call it before when I was in sim racing to try and add a bit of realism to it. I always used to class it as an electrical failure because technically it was green. So I used to use that, but I had several people in the comments at the time saying, "Why are you calling it electrical failure? It'd be clearly disconnected." So it was the illusion of making it seem real back then. But of course, these days it's more acceptable to say that you had a disconnection. But nevertheless, the drivers who haven't had disconnections, touch wood, are on the screen right now, and they're all set to get underway for the second Grid B race of the evening, the first race on live broadcast tonight at Oulton Park. So Fowler and Emil Gisele on the front with the grid. We've got his name for a second. Haven't got the start though, as away they go from the line and up towards Old Hall for the first time. Looks as though James Fowler will have the whole shot into turn one, but the circuit does see one or two drivers run wide at times in turn one. Case in point, we see Gisele running a little wide there, losing out second place to Jeff Newman as they head down through Cascade. There's a bit of a nasty bump on the brow of that hill, which if you're not careful can catch you out. Has caught out two drivers though. Ben Buckley and also Rob Oldland are off into the gravel at Cascades. They now race down Lakeside for the first time towards Island Bend. This is a very fast, very narrow corner where if you try to go through any more than single file, there's a chance you can get speared off into that large grassy area on the left-hand side, into this brilliantly banked corner of Shell Oils, complete 180 degree all the way through. Then you fire out the other side towards the first of two chicanes, the first being Britain's. That's a quick pop left and right and then up the hill, so they'll use as much of the curve as possible, but there's quite a large line of tyres there to distract anyone cutting too much. Then what they do on the exit, they go past the marshal's post, pop up over Hilltop, and then head down towards the second chicane at Hislops. And Fowler already showing his prominent pace at the moment in this first lap, being chased down by Jeff Newman, and then Emil Gisele in third position from Holdcroft in fourth. And then we've got Hutchinson who's made a good start in fifth place, followed by Jim Earlham in sixth, then Mike Hilton, Ben Buckley and Rob Oldland, who has recovered. Of course, remember, Oldland and Buckley had that mistake at Cascades that saw them both off into the gravel track, but they have recovered and they're actually a couple of seconds off the next car in front of them, which being Mike Hilton.
Yeah, that's a real shame for Buckley and Oldland, because they were looking quite good in the first race. They just went side by sides going down into Cascades and out of the first turn, Old Hall, and it just didn't didn't work. It's quite a common thing in real life, that as well, I think.
Yeah, Cascade can be a scene of trouble sometimes when drivers get it wrong, particularly when you're all bunching up towards that corner for the first time. But into Old Hall at the end of lap number 1, Fowler leads the way with Newman in second place. Gisele, the Belgian, in third. It's Woodcroft. Erkenbach is up to fifth at the expense of Jim Earlham, so that's been a change of position into the top 5. Then Hilton, Buckley and Oldland, who are fairly close together. Buckley and Oldland have caught up pretty quickly to Mike, so there might be oncoming changes. Buckley's having a daring move up into the Cascades. This is where he went off last time, and he throws the car into the corner up towards the apex. But even though these Caterham Academy cars do feature fairly fairly low levels of grip running Avon road tyres, Chris, it's surprising sometimes how much grip you can get out of them. And the Academy car is one of the perfect tools for drivers to learn car control and to learn racecraft, and a car that doesn't have to rely on aero grip. It's all mechanical, and you have to try and make do with what you've got to the best of your abilities.
Yeah, and the slightly lower levels of grip actually mean that you are always going to slide your car. They're actually very forgiving in that they're not snappy. They do tend to give way quite gently and allow these sort of slides and moments to happen without actually costing you more than a bit of time. So when you get higher up with the slightly grippier rubber, the car can become a little bit sort of it can bite you back if you slide too much. It will just have a limit at which it really does spit you and you get your tank slappers on.
Yeah, the Academy car does seem as one of those machines where you can afford, to a certain extent, because of the lower levels of grip, to throw it around a bit more like a historic car in many cases. You kind of get to throw it onto limited grip, and it's fairly forgiving to come back to you because of the low power and the low weight. But then, as you say, when you start getting to more grippier tyres, when you go up through road sport, through 270s, and then when this car eventually becomes its ultimate evolution in the 310R Championship, then it becomes a point where you're running on effectively semi-slicks, and it makes it much more grippier, much faster, and a little bit lighter, and a tiny bit more powerful, and therefore you've got a little bit sort of more grip to play with, but less leeway of being able to throw the car around. It requires more precision than just going gung-ho corner by corner, because as you say, when the car does eventually snap, if you try to collect it back again, as I'm sure you know from previous experience, it's not all that forgiving when you've got more grip to play with. It can bite back, as you say, fairly hard indeed.
Yeah, and these drivers, they're all learning their craft still. This is the B grid, so the faster guys all go into the A grid through pre-qualifying. So a lot of these guys are still learning what their craft, and what, even though we're talking about the car sliding, it is still quicker for them to go without the sliding. So it's about learning where is that limit, how far can you push it before that slide does cost you time.
Speaking of costing time, at the moment, Emil Giselig is getting a little bit stuck behind Jeff Newman, and he might want to get a move on, because if he doesn't get around Jeff pretty quickly, Jeff doesn't put his foot down anymore, it's only going to allow James Fowler to keep on extending that gap, because there's only a couple of tours of the Oulton Park International Circuit, and he has got the gap up to 3.1 seconds already. So this is looking pretty convincing for James at the moment, with a clear track in front of him, which is not really a luxury that Emil has, but he might get it in a second, because running deep into the first part of his slops there was Newman, so possibly starting to feel the effect of all that pressure that's being applied. And Giselig now starts to pull alongside on the left-hand side, up over Clay Hill, under the bridge, and up towards Druid. So puts a little wheel onto the grass, but he is on the inside line for the right-hander at Druids, making his way through. If he can get the car stopped, which is difficult when you've got half the car off the road, completely off the road goes Jeff Newman, though, bounding off through the gravel and back onto the circuit, and that almost goes completely around at 180 degrees, and he's got to be careful on the rejoin, because there are cars running wide on the exit of that corner. And the trouble is, Chris, it is one of those corners. I've seen John Clellan do that back a couple of times with British touring cars in the early 90s, and it's particularly when you've got cold tyres, but also a lack of grip. If you push too hard into that particular corner, there's not that much runoff to go, and it can send you clattering into the barriers if you don't treat that corner with a bit more respect.
Yeah, there's generally no such thing as a small crash around Druids. It's extremely fast, dedicated corner with very little brake going into it, and then you have to carry the exit, and if you do get anything wrong, there's very little space to allow the car to run out. So it looks like now the story of the race is going to be, can Emil catch up with James Fowler out in the lead? He's got 4 seconds to do, and James Fowler has been pretty consistent out there in front, so it might be a tough ask.
Might be a tough ask, but the key thing to watch for is that number next to Giselig's name in second place, whether that goes up or down. It's currently going up. It's creeping up to almost 5 seconds as we now watch the battle for third place going on between... Oh, which it's not going to creep up anymore, because that off the road was... That was Darren Hallcroft. So Darren Hallcroft was as high as around about third or fourth place. So he's now dropped down to 6th as a result of that mistake. And it looks as though, Chris, rather than have any cars around him, he possibly looks as though he did that all by himself. Yeah,
it did. It looked like he just drifted the car off wide. It's very easy to drop a wheel over the grass. It's quite bumpy there. And it absolutely will bite you back then.
So he's now got work to do to pick himself up from 6th place. He's got a 1.6 second gap to make up now. He's just there in the background, just behind the turquoise machine of Ben Buckley, who runs in the top 5. So he's back up into 5th after his escapade into the Cascade gravel trap briefly with Rob Oldland, when he also went off at the same time too. Now we're looking at Danny Erkenbachs, who is Dennis Erkenbachs is having one of his better runs in Grid B. He's up there in 3rd position. Certainly has put his foot down a bit more in practice this week, it seems. Jim Earlham trying to keep with him as they head under the Carloop Bridge and up towards Lodge Corner for the end of another lap, with just under 7 minutes to go. Ben Buckley, his gap, he's 2.6 seconds back and making steady progress to try and catch up with them. But at the moment, at the front of the field, Chris, 2 minute 1.9 for Giselig in 2nd place, but the gap isn't really coming down. It's up to 5.3 seconds, and running wide like that might give him a little bit of extra time, but apart from that, he's not really making that many inroads, if at all.
Yeah, no, it does. It looks like they're settling a little bit further back. We were just watching them. It looks like that's all gone horribly wrong between the three of them. Darren Holcroft now is back in Jim Earlham. They're recovering as Rob Oldham just gets around him. So there looks like that battle, unfortunately, cut away just as it got a bit spicy. But yeah, it doesn't look like he's got the legs to be able to drag James Fowler back in. It certainly looks like Fowler's having a nice run. He's keeping everything nice and clean and tidy, whereas everyone else is losing their head. I think it's worth saying Oulton Park is an extremely technical track, and when we get to the A grid, I think you'll see that difference of just a little bit more control really helps around a track like Oulton Park to really keep the car's momentum going, and these little mistakes cost you dear.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And we were talking about precision as well. And when you've got a circuit which has got a massive variety of different corners, like, for example, hislops and lots of different elevation changes, being so precise counts for so much around a circuit like Oulton Park. On circuits that are a little bit faster, arguably it matters a tiny bit less. You always have to be precise as much as you can do. But when it comes to circuits that are a little bit faster, like, to a certain extent, Thruxton, certainly Snetterton, the faster sections do allow a little bit more leeway, whereas when you've got the more technical areas, you've got to really sort of make sure you hit your apex one after the other. And as Darren Hallcroft is showing, he's trying to regain time as best as he can now to get back onto the tail of Dennis Circumbax to head up the hill. So the man that had the spin was Jim Erland back up at Old Hill Corner. And Rob Oldham, I noticed there, was, as you pointed out at the time, very lucky not to get collected. He must have been inches away from contact. So he's now progressing steadily up into 6th position. And I know he's got quite a growing YouTube channel, actually, where he's been documenting his sort of steps of getting himself ready for the Caterham Academy and building his car and testing it and doing his R's license. Certainly making a name for himself in terms of promotion and putting himself out there. And he seems to be one of those drivers who is very keen, all in with the concept of the Caterham Academy, and is certainly getting his mileage in as much as he can do on the sim, so it prepares him when he does his first race weekend of the 2020 season, which eventually should be up at Caterham Park at the beginning of August.
I think they've got the Oulton Park round before Caterham Park at Cadwell for them.
You are correct. I should know that, being BRSEC, but you're absolutely right. They are racing here in mid-July at Oulton Park, so actually it's quite a fitting final round for Rob to get practicing for his first round, which is, as you rightly pointed out, at Oulton Park right here.
Yeah, and I'd say people like Dennis are looking forward to that, as is Rob. And like you say, yeah, Rob, go and have a look at his YouTube channel, especially for people who are interested in taking part in the academy. He really is giving an insight into, how does that process work and what's involved in it. So yeah, go and check that resource out. It's great.
I think there was another YouTube channel which I think was run by Mr. Chris Hutchinson that also did very similar sorts of things when you were coming up in the academy. I remember there was a video or videos documenting your build at the time. It was back in, I think it was 2015, wasn't it? I think it was.
They all still exist. 2013, in fact, so it was the end of 2012 when I built my car. I'm an old timer. That feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
You're certainly a Caterham racing veteran, but you have got a title to show for it, though. You are 3-to-9 champion from 2018, which was, of course, the very hard fought to get. So, certainly someone who knows their stuff, having raced in, well, I think you're on the verge almost of potentially racing in 7 UK championships it's called now when we get back going again. At least that was the plan, at least going forwards into at least I think next year before everything kicked off, wasn't it?
That's right. So that's still the plan. As soon as next year kicks off, I shall be in my car. So I do have a 420, and that's my aim. So but yeah, at the moment I think I chose the right year to take it off from motorsport.
I think anyone who was taking sabbatical probably inadvertently would share the same sentiment in terms of they weren't planning to race, and maybe this was a bit of a sign for them not to. So, but not to make light of a bad situation at all, we'll get back to the on-track action, where all we can really say is James Fowler has got this race really very well under control, almost coming up to 10 seconds his advantage now over the rest of the field. Inma Jesselink in second place, but again, has to be commended for his first race on the server tonight, at least in the series, to get almost 10 seconds, he's 10 seconds behind. To be up in second place is incredibly impressive. Ben Buckley's up to third, though, so after his little mishap at Cascades in the gravel, he's got himself up into a podium position for what it's worth, so he's kept a lot out of trouble very much after that, and is trying to push himself forward. And
not only that, Scott, I think he's actually catching up quite nicely with Emil up front there. Certainly the gap there is a lot less than it was when he first had his incident, isn't it? So he had some speed tonight. Unfortunately, he just didn't get to show it.
Yeah, it's quite a pretty looking car as well that he's got. He debuted that livery a couple of weeks ago when it was all put together, and I have to admit, it's certainly one of the finer looking liveries between Academy and 420R. And you will see drivers who compete in both series using pretty much the same livery, but just having it adapted for both Academy and 420R versions, and there's very little which I think Belobros has to do. And it's also very good that we had on Friday, we had Jaroslav Cherny as well, who was guesting in the 420R series, and he's the man who actually put these physics together for both of these cars. So the 420R and the Academy, he knew them pretty well in terms of driving them in the sim, so maybe it was no surprise in many cases for us that he was able to pull out a great result from last, I think it was about 5th or 6th in race 1, and then potentially he was in fight for a podium in race 2.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's back again tonight, so he is going to be racing the Academy cars around. So look forward to seeing how he gets on. Now he hasn't had to come through this pre-qualification around the B grid. He's straight in with the A grid crew.
I wonder how he's going to fare when he gets a proper crack at qualifying this time, rather than starting at the back. We saw what he could do when he started 5th or 6th on the grid in the second race after he picked his way through the field in the first encounter at Brands Hatch, but being able to put in a proper lap time remains to be seen. So James Fowler then, with a lick of flame from the exhaust, heads through Island Bend for the last time and up towards Shell Oils, and that gap is still pretty comfortable at 10 seconds. I think the gap between Jesselink and Buckley gone up now to 6 seconds. It was 5.3 the last time I looked at that, but it's now back up to 6. So a little bit of time lost there, or Jesselink just woke up and realised he has to try and push on to maintain that second place and just get that slightly bit more of a buffer to hold on. And here's the onboard view from James Fowler, just changing up through the gears. And now he makes his way down towards Hislops to see when he decides to brake, which marker to use. Brakes it just after the 100 metres, and then clips the first part of the apex, hugs the inside for the second, and then that sort of complex of corners, you almost have to really keep to the left-hand side after you go through the second part, because you're setting the car up, Chris, to get through that final part, which is effectively the Knickerbrook corner, to get you the best possible drive and exit up Clay Hill and towards Druitt. And
it's an incredibly important corner, that one of the most important on the whole circuit. So yeah, if you need to concentrate on that final right-hander, especially in the Academy car where you don't have quite as much power. You need that all the momentum you can get to carry you up and keep the speed all the way around Druitt into this final set of corners.
He's done that pretty much from start to finish. He headed into Lodge for the final time. Not the final time tonight though, but the final time in this race. He has dominated the B grid from the word go and up to the checkered flag. He will end it on a high. He will go to grid A. It is James Fowler who wins at a canter both grid B races to secure his spot in the main event, so to speak. Emil Jesselink comes across the line in a very respectable second place in both races. He might be one to watch in the future should he come back, the impressive Belgian. Third place for Ben Buckley, very well to recover after his mistake on the first lap, and he was certainly trying to close the gap in as much as possible. Dennis Erkenbats is going to come across in 4th position any moment now. Or he would be. He might be side by side with Darren Holcroft, actually, side by side across the line, and Holcroft got him. Just at the flag, Holcroft managed to snatch away 4th position from Danny Erkenbats. So Dennis Erkenbats. I will get the first name right eventually. and then 6th place for Rob Oldland. That happened before with Crawford, didn't it? God, I'm terrible. Anyway, Earlham is 7th. And then sadly we lost Jeff Newman and Mike Hilton, both deciding to retire for either damage or whatever reason they had to retire. Whether anything had anything to do with any mishap they had at Old Hall remains to be seen. We might have to find out later on afterwards.
It is time for us to swap servers. So I'm going to leave you with the results page, as in all the A races we've had so far, and the next time we see cars, it will be in the A grid.
Fantastic. So whilst Chris gets everything ready to swap the servers over, let's just talk you through, looking at the results screen, pretty much where we've come from up to this point in the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Race Series. So we started off at Silverstone National, where we saw 2 different winners. Steve McMaster picking up the first win of the season, and that will be his one and only win of the season so far. And then he was also joined on the top step by Chris Gillicorn in the second race. 2 second places for Will Rossetti and a 3rd each for James Fowler and Harry Senior. But then Senior would go on for a run of 5 wins in a row. He picked up doubles at Oulton Park on the national circuit and Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit. And then he picked up the win in race 1 at Anglesey before Matthew Lewis broke the win streak. And he'd already done that in the 420 Rs after he picked up a brace at Knock Hill. Podiums also along the way for James Murphy, Steve McMaster, James Wingfield also picking up a rostrum visit. David Rowe also as well, and David will also go on to pick up a win himself at 2 excellent races on the amended Grand Prix circuit at Zandvoort in Holland. It was a win apiece for Lewis and Rowe, and the winning margin in both, get this, between both races was a combined 0.0009 seconds, 9 thousandths of a second between 2 race victories, 2 winning margins in both races, which was absolutely sensational. And then Harry Senior, through all that sort of sequence, picked up 3 podiums in a row with second place, but then he was back on form at Snetterton with 2 fairly commanding victories on the 200 circuit. Steve Master with a pair of second places, and then James Murphy and David Rowe picking up 3rd place as well. So that's where we've come from. Here's where we are. And here are our Class A competitors. And you can see the drivers already mixing it in qualifying with around about 3.5 minutes to go. And straight away, you look at the timing pylon and you can see that Will Rossetti has fired in a 1 minute 59.602. Anyone dipping under 2 minutes is an incredibly special lap indeed. So to do that, not just him, but also Jaroslav Cherny and Harry Senior are the ones to beat in terms of pace so far. It seems Paul Fernerhuff is running well in qualifying with 5th fastest time so far. Guy Crawford is 6th, Tom Willis, and then a few drivers who are not quite as high as we expect them to be, although they might possibly prove us wrong. We usually say that sometimes when the likes of David Rowe and Matthew Lewis and Steve Arnell and Blair McConaughey are a little further down than we would expect them to be, but then usually tends to be the case, Chris, as soon as we talk about that, with a couple of minutes to go in a qualifying session, they also tend to pull out their fastest lap of the session at that point. So rather than being that lower down now, either they're just possibly not really liking Oulton Park to their taste, as whoops, someone dips into the Paris that hit stops. I've seen TBR Tuscans do that, but usually some of these drivers who are a bit further down by the time we join them, they tend to put in quite a quick lap towards the end of the session when either the track is getting clearer or it's getting potentially a little bit faster at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, it's good. It's great. As long as you've got a banker in early, that's the most important thing from a driving point of view. If you get your banker in, you can really let loose and see what happens and go for that Banzai lap. But yeah, you'll see some people that do want to get that first lap in immediately, and we've seen on the server that, you know, there's people that are more successful than that and others, but it does look like things are a little bit not the order we're expecting. Certainly Will Rossetti has been fast all through our testing and pre-qualifying, so he is definitely a man on form around this track.
Another one on form again is Harry Senior. He's just popped up to 2nd ahead of Jaroslav Cherny, so he's Cherny down to 3rd now. He's in the pit lane at the moment. He won't get around quick enough to set another lap time, so that as though the best he can do at the moment is 3rd, provided nobody else pops up in the timing sheets. David Rowe, there's a 2 minutes 0.1 on that last lap he's done. James Murphy's also jumped in with a 2 minute 0.648, and Matthew Lewis, as we did talk about him, and as I rightly predicted, as soon as we talk about how low he is down the order, back 3rd place in qualifying. He's got time to do one more, but he has got quite a bit of traffic in front of him to deal with, so how he's been able to handle that, we'll wait and see. Here's Steve McMaster in his Ford GT40 1966 Ken Miles inspired livery. So it's got the sort of duck egg blue with the white stripes and the red front wings. If you look at the design of that car, which came 2nd in Le Mans 1966, you'll see that the front sort of area around the front wings over the wheel arches on the front of that car are red, but the rest of the colour scheme is meant to mimic that. And he's currently sat in 5th fastest at the moment. So what's intriguing is we've got all 5 of our race winners that we've had so far this season, being Chris Gillicorn, Steve McMaster, Harry Senior, David Rowe and Matthew Lewis. They're all on the grid together, but it does seem to be, Chris, a case of different circuits will suit different drivers, and so far it does appear to be that out of those race winners, Senior, Lewis and McMaster are tending to favour Oulton Park a bit more, and Harry has told us a number of times that he's been looking forward to Oulton, as it's pretty much his favourite circuit, so no surprise at all to see him at the front anyway, but particularly at Oulton Park, it's quite a statement to be up there in 2nd place. But I think admittedly, Will Rossetti's made even more of a statement. To be on provisional pole position with the session coming to a close, that potentially means we could even have a 6th different winner if fortunes play out that way.
Yeah, I mean, Oulton Park's a real driver's favourite of a lot of them. As we see McMaster drifting wide there, that might have scuppered that lap, I think it has. But yeah, so it's, and so yes, there are certain tracks you like being quick at just because of the panache of it almost, and Oulton Park's definitely one of those. It's definitely got more to it than some of the other tracks we visit as far as technical, and it's a real journey you go on. You go out up and down the hills, as we see Matthew Lewis coming up to the line. We see James Murphy moving up to 6th place there. Matthew Lewis jumps to 2nd with a 1:59.678. Again, gap's incredibly close, but shoves Senior back down into the 2nd row. We see them all stopping as they finish their qualifying session.
Yeah, that tends to be the typical thing in sim racing I've seen. Right, session's over, crash into everyone. So obviously they would never do that in real life, but in the sim they can get away with it to a certain extent. So, and also noticed that David Rowe did also move up into the top 5 with his last effort, so he was certainly listening and had the live stream tuned in. So, pretty much as we would expect, again, all the race winners apart from Chris Gillicorn up there, as well as drivers who potentially could do so. So, the grid for race 1 is as follows. Will Rossetti on pole position with a sterling lap of 1:59.602. And that means then looking back that there actually is the top 7 drivers are all under 2 minutes. And we said anything under 2 minutes is a superb lap. So I have a feeling, as Chris, I think earlier sort of alluded to, that it's going to be quite a competitive evening to round off this first Caterham Academy series. Matthew Lewis will start on the front row alongside him. Harry Senior back on the second row, but with Jaroslav Cherny for company. Then David Rowe and James Murphy, the DPR twins, followed by Steve McMaster and Paul Fernerhuff, then Guy Crawford and Tom Willis, last year's Academy White Group champion, in 10th. Chris Skillicorn just outside the top 10 in 11th. Tim Van Hees back once again in 12th, the Belgium. Then Mark Blannett and Steve Arnell. Today's, I think, lowly qualifiers appear to be, well, there's only really one that I can see, and that's Blair McConaughey down in 15th place. And he picked up 2 podiums last time we saw any racing action in the 420Rs. But as we know, 420R and the Academy cars are 2 very different beasts indeed. There might be Caterhams on the badge, but they're very different in terms of power levels and grip levels to try and handle. And then Andy Steele, Alan Curtis, and of course James Fowler at the back of the grid. It looks to be also along with, I think, maybe James Wingfield as well, who seems to have been a late addition, but he was pretty prominent last time out. At least he got pole position in qualifying at Snetterton. At least he was on the front row at Snetterton, and wasn't able to convert that with some difficult bits and pieces. So, Chris, effectively, this is almost a bit of, there's no points on offer, but I'm sure there'll be bragging rights and pride, and the fact they want to race, etc., will be all on the line for these guys. And I'm guessing there'll hopefully be very much an end of season feel for this one. It was like an end of term, but hopefully the driving standards will be just as clean as they mostly have been across the season, and no one's going to try any banzai moves up and down the order, although these are Caterham races we're talking about, Chris, as you know very well. So try and tell them not to do something, and they tend to almost do the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, because of the narrowness of the track and the lack of runoff, a small incident can quickly escalate and then can quickly involve a lot of the pack. Oulton Park is an old-fashioned traditional circuit in that it doesn't have massive runoffs like you would around somewhere like Silverstone. So yeah, if you drop a wheel over, you're not going onto another bit of tarmac, you're actually going onto grass, and that does cost you.
It is one of those rare circuits where the layout has hardly changed at all. The only really changes there's been have been to any safety changes after any incidents, and also with the 2 chicanes that were put in as well. There also has been the addition of the Fosters and Island layouts as well, which have been used by British touring cars and the like. But we're on the full international layout once again. And back in the days of the 60s and the 70s, when they used to run the Oulton Park Gold Cup here, there's only one Gold Cup they're going for here, and that's the bragging rights for winning either races tonight. So Will Rossetti on the left in the Gulf colours in pole position, white and red of Matthew Lewis alongside. The final race evening of the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series here at Oulton Park. I predict one of these first 4 rows are going to pick up victory, but who is it going to be for the second to last time in the Academy Series? We are racing at Oulton Park, and it's a pretty clean start initially from everyone, but down towards turn 1, hold your breath, boys and girls. This might get a little bit messy if they can get through cleanly. So Rossetti goes through. One car runs wide on the exit, but he managed to get back onto the road. That was James Murphy, and they are going 2 by 2 already because Senior's looking racy, as is Lewis and Shirley. They're all going to head down towards Cascades. Lewis is looking around the outside of Rossetti for the lead, but he's made contact, I think, with Senior. It could have been Netco, one of the 2, but that means Matthew Lewis has been shot out onto the grass. So he's now got some work to do, and he's sent all the way down to the back of the field, just about in 18th place. So a disaster for Matthew Lewis at the start of this race. Meanwhile, at the front, Rossetti now under threat from Senior, who's being edged onto the grass. They clatter wheels into the apex at Shell Oils, and here comes Cherny diving up the inside, showing no respect for the regulars. Up in 2nd place he goes, side by side with Harry Senior. And at this rate, Chris, if he keeps on progressing, he could even go for the lead in a second.
Yeah, he's holding his ground, isn't he, in this long train of cars. What a great sight that is. But yes, he showed last time out he was willing to get through the pack to get to the front, and this time he's starting right at the front. So what can he do from there? Will Rossetti still holding on, though, down into this big braking zone. Hold your breath as they head in here. It's tight. Harry Senior going around the outside, just made some wheel contact with with Cherny, and it's sent him sideways. Murphy trying to get by, but he's also getting on the power desperately late. All action going through the chicane, but they all appear to be just about facing the same way still.
Absolutely. You can tell that Jaroslav made the physics from this car, because I'm sure he would have been in the slide just like that about 100,000 times when he was developing it, so he knows exactly how to catch it in many cases. Then again, these Caterham racers will certainly know how to deal with a car like this many times over as well. Now, Steve McMaster's a little bit further back in the order. He's in 7th place, you've seen there, battling with Guy Crawford, but he's got quite a cacophony of Caterhams behind him. He's going side by side with what looks to be Chris Skillicorn to his outside. He's got McMaster alongside, just in front of him, trying to get back through his Tom Willis as well. You've got Tim Van Hee in the yellow car behind him. He's also got Mark Bennett and Steve Arnell. And Matthew Lewis, meanwhile, still back in 18th place, and he's 2.6 seconds away from Alan Curtis. So I think, unfortunately, it's safe to say he won't be winning this first race. But the question now has got to be, he'll have to go David Rowe style, sorry David, where he kind of has a mistake early doors and has to try and carve his way back up through the field to try and make up the time to get as high a grid spot as he can do for race number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to think about race number 2. So yeah, you don't want to give up. You want to keep working hard. We've got our kind of Will Rossetti pulling out. We've got the top 3 who are kind of, well, we've got the 2nd and 3rd fighting, but then everyone else seems to want to be in that 4th place at the moment. We've got a real pile of them, and they're all just fighting over the same bit of tarmac. It's great to see. As we see Harry just not quite being able to make that move onto Cherney, but he is still hounding the rear end.
Really is. He's done this several times before. He's done it to Matthew Lewis and David Rowe, to so many of the other top line names in this series. Will Rossetti trying to escape up the rope early doors here as he heads up through the Britain chicane, pops up over Hilltop, and now down towards the Hislop chicane. And Cherney now has the outside line. We've been here before, but it's now positions reversed. It's now Senior on the inside line. Cherney slots in behind him this time. There's no contact just yet, but it is starting to bring both James Murphy in the black and orange Caterham and his fellow DPR man, his team manager at DPR, David Rowe, just running wide there a little bit in 5th position. Furdenhoff still 6th from McMaster, Crawford, Willis and Van Hee. As for Matthew Lewis, he's up to 15th, so he's picked off Mark Bennett, who's in the pit lane sadly. Chris Skillicorn has dropped back a couple of spots down to 17th place. Silverstone race winner, and then Alan Curtis has also been disposed of as well. The next man's going to be Andy Steele, but back to this battle for 2nd place is Rossetti, almost oblivious to what's going on behind, must be laughing in his mirrors watching all that happen, as we now see James Murphy looking for the undercut as Cerny gets sold the dummy, and he just about gets edged out wide as Murphy slots into 3rd place. And this takes us back to what happened at Silverstone Grand Prix, doesn't it, Chris, where we saw Senior and Murphy as he sets the fastest lap of the race, and that is effectively on qualifying pace for Murphy, right on the tail of Harry Senior. And back at Silverstone, Murphy was really putting Senior under pressure, but what got the better of him? Being a little bit too enthusiastic and over-exuberant, and that's what cost him a potential win. So hopefully this time, Chris, he's learned from his mistakes and will try to be a bit calmer this time.
Yeah, we've seen Murphy backwards through the field a little bit in the most recent races we've had on our service, but it's great to see him back up here fighting hard, getting really squeezed to the inside there. Island Bend is so tough to go side by side. It looks like James has got the inside line. Can he hold it without drifting off onto the grass? Oh, it's tight down there, but he seems like he might have made that move stick just by hanging in there. Harry's still making the best of it, but I think James probably has got this done. I say that. You call it, Scott. I have no idea.
Well, what's happening now? Well, they're banging wheels up towards Hislop chicane, or Britain chicane. Oh, they've called it too soon. As round goes James Murphy. Now, the question is, did he jump or was he pushed? I have to say, Jubis, he looked like he was pushed, but we'll have to wait and see. Rather than, I think I'll have to leave one for Chris to have a look at afterwards. But meanwhile, as James Murphy now has to make his own recovery job, we're watching here. This is Paul Fernhoff battling with Steve McMaster over the final top 5 spot as they head their way through Hislops and then through Knickerbrook once again. And that's David Rowe's made a mistake. He's dropped off or had a mishap. It looks as though he was trying to possibly either get past Jaroslav Cherney or just put his power down a bit too quickly. He's now under threat from McMaster, who darts out to what will be the outside line for the right-hander coming up at Druids. If he can go around the outside, it's a bold move. He's going to run out of road. Yes, he will. Bounding over the grass. Can he get it back onto the road quickly enough? But he's being held up by 3 or 4 cars, preventing him from getting through because they all run wide on the exit over the curb. And so he now slots back into position in 9th place, but under threat now from both Steve Arnell and Blair McConaughey. Master takes that outside line, but he holds onto the place. I think possibly Arnell had to back out of that move. He might have felt there was an opportunity to get through, and all that's doing now is allowing Blair McConaughey to get through. So we've not even hit halfway yet, Chris, and there's so much action going on. I'm almost barely keeping as much as you can, and there's more going on as now Paul Fernhoff gets slapped in the side by Guy Crawford. McMaster somehow holds that one, and Lewis running a little bit wide there. He's ahead of James Murphy. I'm just as speechless as you are, I think, in many cases, just about.
There's too much going on to call, isn't there? I think they're closer together than they are on the starting grid. So, the starting grid was their most spread out they've been. They all want the same bit of tarmac, and you could just see how one mistake by McMaster and how far back he fell through the field, with everyone running so close. If you go out wide like that, you will lose that 3 to 4 places, which has been unusual for Steve McMaster. He's normally Mr. Reliable. I think it's worth calling out Paul Ferniehoff. It was just commentator's curse. He was having such a good run. He hasn't been the fastest guy on the server, but he was up to sort of 5th place, and now I've cursed that entirely, but he's dropped right back.
It's all right. It's not the first time the commentator's curse has been laid on. I've done it several times, so I unfortunately I know what that feeling's like. But watching what's happening right now, let's hope we don't put any more on these drivers. We see Guy Crawford having a look up the outside at Tom Willis, being a bit bold here to have a look here to try and get himself into the top 5. If he can pressure Willis into a mistake, that will certainly help him out. He was a little sideways on the exit of the second part of Hislop, so now we see Tim Vanhee getting held up by Crawford's little bit of a slide there, as Vanhee, not sure where he was going there for a second, he was heading towards the grass, and McMaster says, thanks very much for that one, Tim, if you don't mind. And he goes up 1 place, he might go for 2. Now, we learned from his mistake last time, which the answer to that is yes, because rather than trying to dive down the outside line and running wide and losing several places as a result, he thinks, no, I learnt from last time, I'm going to dip back in and try and pick him off a couple of corners later. So, quick check of what's going on in front as we keep an eye on what's going on. This Crawford gets a little love tap there from McMaster under braking. It's still Rossetti who leads the way, and the gap is fairly static at about 2 seconds. In fact, lap time wise, they're very equally matched. The senior was only half a tenth quicker on that last lap. But what's intriguing now is both Cherney and Rowe were lapping a little bit quicker. They did a 1:59 that time by. So Cherney's only half a second away from senior in second place. And Rowe is a further 2.4 back, but he's lapping quicker than senior as well, but on the same pace as Cherney. We're on board now with the Czech driver, Jaroslav Cherney. Of course, we said he was the man that designed the physics for these cars, so he would have driven hundreds or even thousands of hours of these cars trying to work them out and taking feedback from drivers. And I imagine that all the feedback he's been getting from all the drivers will mean that if he was to keep on adapting the physics a bit more going forwards, he's certainly got a lot of feedback and data from all these different Caterham drivers who can compare how this car feels to the real car they've driven on the circuits over the last few years.
Yeah, and he's absolutely involved in that process. So we're starting that discussion now about how do we improve these and maybe even extend the Caterham models. We've got the Academy and the 420 to play with at the moment, but we're certainly looking to increase that to the full field of Caterhams, and that's all in the works at the moment, which is great and very exciting.
Sounds good, and of course it means that people who do also benefit, not just us in this series, but also those who do use these mods more publicly, will have to get a chance to see the full Caterham roster should they be so inclined to let the public have a go. Matthew Lewis is certainly having a go here. He's just having a bit of a squirm around in front of Steve Arnell to hold on to 10th place. He's on the comeback trail, but only as high as the top 10. He's got 5.5 minutes or less than that to try and get himself a few places higher, but thankfully the cars in front aren't too far away now. We've got Blair McConaughey in 9th place chasing after Tim Vanhee, and in front of them you've got Crawford and this man Steve McMaster. He wants a top 5 place again. His target will be, his target will be Tom Willis, and now it's Matthew Lewis's turn to explore the track limits of the right-hander at Druids. He did exactly what McMaster did, but this time a bit more graceful re-entry, Chris. Rather than having a spin and losing several places, he kept his foot in and somehow didn't lose a spot. Maybe the cars behind were a bit frightened to have a go because he wasn't sure exactly where that car was going to spit itself out as it came back on the circuit.
It also happened a little bit later in the corner. Steve McMaster went off quite early doors, and so he had to slow it down to get it so it was turning on the grass. But we saw a little sort of a wheel outside. And he could cope with that just about, and you can see he didn't lose as much time as McMaster did.
Speaking of losing time, Will Rossetti has lost half a second since we last saw him. The gap is down to a fraction under 1.8, now 1.7 seconds at the front of the field. Now I have a feeling possibly that Jaroslav Cherney is just pushing Harry a little bit here to try and turn to get on with it. That was a very graceful drift to Shell Oil's corner. I've never seen a corner entry from a Caterham like that before at Shell Oil's. That was very good stuff indeed from the Czech driver to hold that slide. But I suspect that the pace that Cherney has underneath him at the moment is just encouraging seeing him to kick on a little bit here. He's gained now about less than another sort of 3/10 or so. He's gained a lot of time on that exit of the Hislop Britain chicane now down towards Hislop. So looks like senior quite fancies win here on the circuit, which he was looking forward to the most. And I think possibly if Jaroslav can certainly keep up with him, he'll certainly be brought with in this battle for the lead, which could become, rather than a one-on-one, it could be a three-way for who picks up the victory here. So we could even have a sixth different winner, with Harry Senior adding another one to his trophy cabinet.
Yeah, and Will Rossetti has not yet been in quite this dominant position, so maybe the pressure late in the race, it's quite a long time to concentrate for 15 minutes. It feels short when we're commentating, but believe me, when you're out front and got a gap, it's the longest 15 minutes of your life. So yeah, maybe the pressure's starting to tell, but also Harry's shown tonight he's absolutely on it, so maybe he has just dialed up that speed and just, he's able to turn in just that few tenths a second each lap more.
But if he does have that speed, there's usually times when, for the most part, he's fairly on it straight away, whereas I think being caught up with battles in and around him, it's taken him a few laps to really properly wind it up and have a go. He's done a 1 minute 59.9 on that last lap, but it was 1:59.8, I think, last time for Jaroslav Černý, so he was a tenth quicker or so. And so it does seem as though that Černy's pace is certainly motivating Senior to get a move on and catch up to the lead here, as they have up through Cascades and past Lakeside once again. David Rowe's forward back now to over 3 seconds back in fourth position, followed by Tom Willis in the top five. Then McMaster, Crawford, Van Heat, Matthew Lewis is up to ninth now, and he has done that at the expense of Blair McConaughey. And sadly, one car we seem to have lost in the sequence is Mark Bennett. Unfortunately, he's in the pit lane, but I'm sure either some kind of an issue or an incident which put him right down the order. So the gap is now just over a second between the leaders, and so there's only 2 minutes to go here. So yes, Senior's got the pace, Chris, but he's running out of time to get this done. Yeah,
it would be, in your mind, you're already thinking, have I got enough time to catch and pass? That old adage, catching is one thing, getting past is a very, very different thing. So yeah, he's definitely making those calculations as we go, but that gap, they're all concertinaing together as this race builds to a nice crescendo.
I'm not quite sure that speed trap's right. I'm not sure these Caterhams can quite do 301.6 miles an hour, but we'll take the one on the left that's a bit more accurate. 106 seems a bit more right. But what's intriguing, I noticed there, is that Harry Senior is mighty through that first chicane. Through Britain's, he's able to gain at least a 2 or 3 tenths. He's done that the last couple of laps now, so that seems to be one of the points of the circuit where he's a bit stronger than Rossetti, who in turn seems to be a little more cautious navigating that very tricky sequence of cuts and turns. We're on board with Rossetti now. There's the rear view, and that's the view he'll have in his rear view mirror, staring back at the silver and red Caterham of Harry Senior. Just behind him is the white Caterham, and that is Jaroslav Černý. They head out of Lodge over Dearly, and they start the last lap of this first race. Time flies when you're having fun in Caterhams, particularly when it's at Oulton Park. And into turn one, and again, look at that. Both Senior and Černý, 1 minute 59.5s. That is mega pace. I think that's even quicker than qualifying. Goodness me. So both of them lapping quicker than the pole time set by Will Rossetti. And that could be a sign that Rossetti's in trouble here. Not quite on the same pace as the cars behind, who really have turned it up to 11 as they come out of Cascades, down Lakeside and towards Island Bend and Shedlaws for the last time. And I get a feeling, Chris, that maybe, unless Rossetti puts on a strict defence, it might be a question of when rather than if Harry Senior can get past.
I think we're definitely going to see Harry up to the rear panel of Will. I'm kind of... you shouldn't really root for someone in the commentary position, but I'm kind of rooting for Will here. It's the first time. It would be nice to have a new winner, and it's the first time he's been in this position. He's had a podium, I think, or been close to it at least, on numerous occasions. But to be out in front now on the last lap, it's exciting, and I for one hope that he can hang on to this.
I can tell the smile on your face is quite wide at the moment, as it's now down to 4 tenths of a second. Senior picking up a couple more tenths in that chicane. Oh, there's a wiggle under brakes there. Rossetti is a little bit out of shape. He gets a little bit of a helpful nudge from Senior, which puts him a little wide and offline for Nicker Brook. But this might possibly give the opportunity that Senior's been looking for. Černý closes in now. It is 3 for the lead, and Senior takes a peek, but he might get shown the cross, which he does. Oh. And he goes up into the air. He's made contact. Up and over goes Harry Senior. Oh, goodness me. Now, that can be a bit contentious. Rossetti will state that he defended his line and maybe didn't see Senior there. Senior might state that he was on the grass and alongside him. But unfortunately, Chris, that might be one for you to sort out afterwards in the analysis. Even so, until we see that, up towards the checker flag, and the last corner comes Rossetti. Now, Černý will push him all the way, but even so, it will be up towards the checker flag for the last time. We've had 5 different winners. Now you can make it 6, because Will Rossetti, a little bit messy on the last lap, but he does come across the line to win the first race at Oulton Park in the Caterham Academy Series. That was quite a finish. with Jaroslav Cherny just behind him in second place. David Rowe picks up a rather sort of subdued podium in third. Fourth for Gary Crawford, and fifth for Matthew Lewis at the end of the race there. He managed to pick up a top 5 in the final few laps, picking off some of the drivers. Sixth goes to Tim Van Hees, seventh to Steve Arnell, eighth to Steve McMaster, ninth goes to James Fowler, who was starting towards the back of the grid, and Chris Skillicorn also rounds out the top 10. Then Glenn McConaughey 11th, from Andy Steele 12th, and then it's Fernerhuff, Curtis, Willis, and then, well, Harry Senior unfortunately decided to eject straight to the pits after that, and I guess I can understand if he's feeling quite aggrieved by that, and also James Murphy quite down the order as well. So, bit of shenanigans on the last night, bit of skirmishing and contact, but as it stands, the result is Will Rossetti is our 6th different winner in the caterhamracer.com Caterham Academy Series. He wins by 3/4 of a second from Jaroslav Cherny with his first Academy podium. David Rowe, didn't see much of him after one or two moves that he pulled off earlier on, but he was a fairly quiet third place. Guy Crawford again improving with that consistency, 4th place for him. Then Matthew Lewis, after his mishap at the start of the race, gets himself back into a top 5 position. 6th for Tim Van Heet, 7th to Steve Arnell, and Steve McMaster climbed back up to 8th after his mishap. Then James Fowler and Chris Skillicorn rounding out the top 10. 11th place for Blair McConaughey, 12th for Andy Steele, then Paul Fernerhuff, Alan Curtis and Tom Willis round out the top 15, and then James Murphy was the last car to cross the line, and sadly we all saw what happened for 17th place for Harry Senior and 18th for Mark Bennett, and James Wingfield, who was in the server but sadly did not start the race either. So that's if you want a talking point from that race, because we just got it on the last lap. It does appear in the chat that Harry is making an apology, so he says wherever he clipped he's sorry about that. So potentially maybe Harry thinking, rather than him feeling that he was squeezed on the grass, maybe feeling as though he was a bit too ambitious. How do you see that, Chris, from a driver's point of view?
From a racing point of view, it was always going to happen. Will Rossetti had a wobble going into that chicane, meant that he was slow coming out after a nudge from Harry, it has to be said, through the middle of that corner as well. So he was slow up the hill, Harry looking to one way, but it's very narrow up there. He chose the inside. There was a slight overlap on the wheels, but Will kind of defended as you might expect on the final lap of a race, and I think at that point there was a strange defect in maybe the curb had a sharp edge or whatever, because I think the actual accident itself was a bit more dramatic than maybe would normally have happened. You probably would have just rumbled over the grass a little bit, but it was certainly a dramatic end to that race, and yeah, we'll pull that apart after the race. It's really difficult to call everything, especially in a race that's that action-packed. So we'll leave it until the sort of post-race reviews, and then we'll all learn as a group.
One thing for Harry Senior, I've just noticed in the chat you can see that Alan Curtis saying that he drove under the car as it came down. Scary stuff. It was almost Days of Thunder style. But Harry Senior does state, I hoped it looked cool. So at least he's being a bit more light-hearted about it, regardless if there was any fault to it at all. So one thing it does make very interesting, though, is that drivers such as Harry Senior and also James Murphy and a couple more are going to be starting towards the rear of the field, and we've seen this before with several drivers. James Murphy must be thinking, am I ever going to get a chance to start at the front and actually get a race victory at some point properly now without having to come all the way through from the back? But then again, he did get the nickname Superman, as I've said a few times, and that was from him coming through from the back at Thruxton 2018. He got involved in I think it was a first lap incident which put him out of the restart for that first race, put him towards the back of the grid for the second race the next day, and he drove all the way through from that to a podium, and that was pretty crucial in what would eventually turn out to be his title-winning year. And how he celebrated that when he got onto the roll cage, laid across it and stuck his arm out like he was Superman, hence the nickname that's stuck ever since. I kept on telling him he needs a cape to go on the podium, but whether he'll get one this year I'm not sure. Meanwhile, back at a virtual Oulton Park, the grid is assembling for our final Caterham Academy race, which is almost a bit sad really, because I know we're going to be sort of going towards what the plans are for next year, which will be announced soon, but it's been it's been incredibly entertaining first season, very successful, and what I think must be heartening for you, Chris, as we wait for the start of the race, is more and more cars and drivers have come in from the Caterham Motorsport ranks, and they've really populated this series to make it become as entertaining and as well supported as it currently is. So you must be absolutely delighted with the progress it's made from where it started at the beginning at Silverstone all the way through to where it is now. Yeah,
I really am. It's great to see everyone on board, and also the dedication they show is quite incredible. I guess they've got some spare time on their hands, but nevertheless they spend a long time practicing and making sure they are absolutely getting every single last tenth, but also being able able to run side by side by, you know, having that practice with other drivers on the server. So yeah, absolutely, it's brilliant to see. So here come the lights.
For one final time in this first season of the Caterham Academy Series, we hope you've enjoyed it from the broadcast we've done from Silverstone at the National Circuit all the way through to Oulton Park. One last time in the first season, the red lights are on. It's Rossetti and Shirley on the front row of the grid. Who's going to get the best start down towards Old Hall? Let's get underway one final time. They're all looking pretty clean down towards turn one. Shirley takes the high, wide, handsome line through Old Hall corner to get the run off the outside line. He might be able to pull alongside and get inside towards Cascades. In fact, he has got his nose in front, down the hill towards it, and he is in front. So Jaroslav Cherny diving up to the lead, diving back up the inside to get through it is Raw Rossetti. He might hang him out to dry over the curb. They're going to be side by side, almost touching wheels on the sprint down Lakeside. Now the run towards the Island Bend, with Rossetti on the inside line. Cherny with his lights on, standing his ground. This is a tricky corner. You ideally want to go possibly single file, but they're all daring to go 2 by 2. Showing that a little bit later on the brakes is behind Guy Crawford's going for third. Never mind that, he's going for second on the back of Will Rossetti. Rose slots into third, and this now gives Matthew Lewis a chance to redeem himself after his first lap mishap in race number 1. But Cherny leads the way then into the Hislop chicane, Britain chicane. I keep getting the two chicanes mixed up. So it's now Britain chicane that they're going through for the first time. Rossetti from Rowe, Lewis, Crawford, McMaster. And as for Harry Senior, he's not really made that much progress compared to James Murphy. He's still stuck in 16th place, which is pretty much where he finished in race 1. And James Murphy's up to 12th. Round the outside into the first part of Hislops goes Matthew Lewis into 3rd place. Although Rowe does fight back at Knickerbrook, and it might open the door for both possibly Guy Crawford and also Steve McMaster to get through. Crawford does just squeeze through, but they bang wheels again. McMaster sweeps out from behind Lewis as they head up over Clay Hill, under the bridge and back towards Druids. There's a couple of cars on the grass, one I think is James Murphy, and they head into Druids for the first time. So lots of skirmishes and lots of side-by-side action, Chris, and we haven't even completed lap 1. I think these guys know it's the last race of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. You said Harry Senior hasn't made much progress. I think he's just faced with a wall of Caterhams. I don't think there's anywhere for him to put his car that could possibly get past anyone. But Matthew Lewis, great recovery drive and absolutely fighting for this. He wants to get right back to the front of this race. He's defending down the inside here as hard as he can into turn 1, but that's going to leave him open to attack on the exit with people like McMaster taking that wide line, and with Guy Crawford up the inside for more wheel banging, but hopefully Matthew can make it back onto the track without too much issue, and he does.
Yeah, he does seem to have got away with that just about. As for Harry Senior, he's just popped up to 14th at the expense of Paul Ferdinand. Back up the inside into Cascade goes Matthew Lewis. And what's intriguing now is back at the front, Shirley's now really under attack from Will Rossetti, but look who's also in the mix now. David Rowe wants, I think, his second win of the season. Shirley wants his first to make it 7 different winners, whilst Rossetti wants the double. The 3 of them are up towards Shellors for the second time, with Rowe all over the back end of Rossetti's Caterham in second place. But they head through the banked hairpin, fire out the other side, and back up through it. And look at the pack for 4th place behind them. Matthew Lewis is leading a cacophony. This is like Silverstone 2019 last year. We had the 30 car train in one of the series, and we had 27 of them all in one pack together for the entire race. It was glorious, not so glorious in the background. Tom Willis has gone off the road, and so has Harry Senior, and so has Blair McConaughey. So in the bid to try and get back through, I think Harry Senior might have potentially thought that that's his race and his series over. There's no points on offer, but I think sadly that might be the end of Harry Senior's Caterham Academy Season 1 adventure, I'm afraid. So McConaughey has got going again, as has Willis, and Bennett's also snapped her as well. But it just seems as though that Harry Senior doesn't appear to have had all the luck tonight, and sadly that end to his second race, or the premature one, unfortunately I'm afraid was the very much unwanted icing on the cake for that.
Sometimes racing is a bit of luck, a bit of, those tiny little moments. Sometimes they don't cost you anything, other times they cost you a lot. However, I think he's had a fair run of it, and it's great to see Journey here, and Will Rossetti and David Rowe also. He's been sort of had a few incidents in early doors in quite a lot of the races, so it's good to see him now. We're kind of 10 minutes or 5 minutes into this race now, and he's still there fighting for that podium.
What's also intriguing, if we talk about podium places, is that look at the cars behind that are starting to reel these top 3 in as they continue to scrap amongst those positions. Matthew Lewis is leading Steve McMaster towards the front here, and also keep watch out for Tim Van here as well. He was actually battling with the front runners in the 420R races on Friday at Brands Hatch on the Indy circuit, so he will certainly be keen to be in the mix as well. We look on board with David Rowe. Here's the view that he's got from looking through his windscreen. This is pretty much the same camera view they would use on the real footage when they're doing the highlights for Caterham's in real circuit racing. And he's watching here as, I think that was Will Rossetti with a big lock-up into the Shell Oil's hairpin, but he's not letting Cerny get away here. And what's interesting this time, Chris, is that I don't know if maybe Rossetti took too much out of his tyres before, or possibly the fact that Senior was motivated by Czerny's pace late in the race, but it seems as though compared to how it was at the end of race 1, Rossetti seems to have a bit more pace to keep up with Czerny this time, whereas before he was dropping off and about a second slower to the cars behind him in race number 1.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it before. Adrenaline has a big effect on your driving, and maybe the nerves, like I say, just kicked in and cost him those little. Basically, your fine motor control goes out the window, and where you meant to just do a little tweak of the steering wheel, you suddenly find yourself turning it quite violently. So that can have a big effect. The other thing I think that's worth noting is that the tyres shouldn't go off. They haven't got sort of. They could go off temperature. That's certainly possible. But they shouldn't get flat spots or anything like that because damage is protected. But yeah, I would put that down to just nerves out front with a lot on the line from his perspective.
His perspective right now is to try and hold off these three caterers behind him as Czerny still leads the way. And Rossetti now has had that bit of a catch-22 situation. He's got to keep on pressing Czerny whilst also dealing with the cars behind. Roby was going to deal with Lewis trying to sneak up the inside for third place. On the charge towards Old Hall Corner, he's got the inside line, but Rose says, no, you don't. As Rossetti almost goes, see you later at the exit of Old Hall Corner. It gets very sideways, and he's lost 2 places as both Rowe and Lewis have gone through. And I wonder now if they can get a chance to attack, if they can leave each other alone and stop fighting, because Czerny now has got the gap open to 1.1 seconds. If it keeps on extending, he will certainly have this in the bag, at least prematurely, or provisionally, before they get to the flag, and it could be a 7th different winner. Lewis, meanwhile, wants to go to the front in 2nd place. He's going for it into Island Bend. This is very tricky to go side by side, and look at that. David Rowe almost putting his 2 wheels onto the white line, never mind the grass. Dives back up the inside into the Shell Oil's hairpin. Rossetti wants to try and get involved as well here. A little wide over the curb, getting 2 wheels on the grass goes to the Matthew Lewis. That gives Rossetti the momentum on the run down towards the complex at the Britain chicane. They bump wheels a little bit, but through into 3rd place goes Rossetti. Squeezes Lewis onto the grass. He gets very sideways, and now here comes Steve McMaster with a great slingshot. Look at that. He literally is like a video game, squeezing through both of them. Shoots the gap between Lewis and Rossetti, which was so fun. It must have been to the cigarette paper, and into what is now 4th place goes McMaster. And look who he's brought with him to play. Murphy, Van Heer, Crawford are all in the mix as well. Meanwhile, Czerny must be laughing in his virtual helmet, thinking, I'm 1.3 seconds up the road, and everyone else is scrapping around me. Brilliant.
Yeah, we see Will Rossetti just made one mistake around the first corner of that last lap, and he has been falling ever since, and certainly been under pressure. You can see he just put out the train and never to return. Obviously, Matthew Lewis facing a similar kind of fate there, but still this gaggle of cars all fighting for this sort of top 10 position. It's great.
Oh, 3 abreast behind. Look at this. You've got Van Heet, Arnell and Crawford going 3 wide into Lodge Corner. I wouldn't advise that, boys, particularly if you all want to survive the other end. And they appear to be listening because they've all slotted into line once again. This is Chris Skillicorn, who's the race winner of the first meeting at Silverstone. It's been sort of a little bit up and down in his pace ever since then. And unfortunately, he's having to try and make up some places here as he didn't qualify too well. He is in the top 10, but having to try and pick his way through as best he can. He's trying to make his way through Tim Van Heer as they approach Cascade down the hill. They go side by side. Now the outside line can work, and it has this time, so Van Heer decided that rather than try and fight it and cause an accident for the pair of them, to slot back in and see if he can pick him up a little bit further way round. But that was Alan Curtis, I think, going for a Burton on the left hand side. Away he went. He was getting a little sideways on the exit, and we keep on watching for our leaders here as they come through. And what's intriguing now is that Rossetti's lost so much time battling with the cars around him. He's almost 2 seconds away from David Rowe now, who in turn is trying to catch up with Czerny, but doesn't seem to have enough to match him as they come through the Britain chicane once more. They're coming up to the last 5 minutes of the season, and a big bump there for Matthew Lewis. It's a big tag slapper, and round he goes. Narrowly missed by Steve McMaster. How on earth he didn't collect him, I'm not sure. Spins it up, puts it back into 1st gear, and away he goes. Fairly dramatic exit from what was, I think, 4th or 5th position, so up a few more places goes everyone else behind him. He's rejoined in 11th place, so it looks as though he's not going to win this race, unfortunately. Neither is James Murphy, sadly. We know Harry Senior's out of the race after he got caught up with an incident with a couple of cars. Mainly, I think it was James Murphy There's Blair McConaughey and Tom Woodwiss, sorry, he got caught up within that incident earlier on. But now David Rowe, he's caught up by a couple of tenths, but it does seem as though it looks as though, compared to his pace when he was up there challenging for the lead in race 1, Chris, that Jaroslav Černý does appear to have this race at the moment under control, but never count out someone like David Rowe. He's someone who can pull it out if he needs to and really put in a good performance if he needs to pick up time.
Yeah, at the moment it looks like it might be a lap of two halves, in that David Rowe seems fast around this first half of the lap, but then Černý takes it all back again in the second half of the lap. Whether that's just by a mistake, but he was certainly catching to under a second through the mid part of that lap, and now has fallen back again to that 1.2 seconds. However, this is the first time he's been free of other cars and not having to defend from behind, so this is where he can really start getting his head down and try and show what he has actually got.
And if you noticed on the lap time as well, he was 3/10 quicker on that lap, in fact, than Černý. He was almost a 2 minute dead for Černý. Was Rowe put at a 1:59.7, and Rossetti was also at a sub 2 minutes as well, so he's got some time to make up too. So this could be intriguing as we come towards the last 4 minutes. It'll be another roughly 3 laps or so, depending on when they can cross the line to start the last lap. Meanwhile, back the distant lot, they're scrapping over at 6th, 7th and 8th. Now, Crawford has decided he wants no part of this and has scampered up the road in 5th position. This is now the scrap between 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. This is now James...
Well, we've just lost Scott there. We'll get him back in just a second. Hey Scott, have you got us in the commentary box again?
Oh, okay, if I dropped that, apologies for that, but just describing the battle that's going on for 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. So we've got Murphy, Skillicorn, Arnell and Van Heel all together, because Crawford has escaped up the road and wants no part of it whatsoever. He's trying to chase after Steve McMaster. There's a bit of a skirmish behind. Is that possibly, who's that? That's Willis going toe-to-toe with, Lewis going toe-to-toe with Fowler, I think, and Fowler's one out for the time being, but Lewis is trying to recover as best he can. But everyone's starting to spread out a little bit more with these last 3 minutes, Chris, but you just get a feeling that possibly they're still winding up to a bit of a conclusion here in these last couple of laps, I think.
I think spread out is a relative term. Certainly compared to the early laps, we've definitely got some gaps, but there's still fights. So for this sort of 6th to 10th almost, and then a little bit further back, we've got some battles going on, with people fighting back through with Matthew Lewis. He's relatively speaking, everything has spread out and calmed down a little bit, but I still think there's some action to come yet.
I think what was incredible, looking at the lap times, pretty much the first 4 all did a 2 minute .0, and the difference was literally hundredths of a second. I'm sure one of them, I think he was first or second, did a 2 minute, almost exactly 2 minutes, as in .000. I'm sure it was that close, but that's how very evenly matched everyone is, and so no one's really making any inroads with each other in the top 4. And as for 5th downwards, well, Murphy is just trying to reel Crawford back in here, see if he can steal a top 5 in this last race. We've got 2.25 minutes on my screen left to go, which would suggest that's probably around about the second to last lap. So we're going to get one more time around after we finish this one. And the gap is stabilising at around about 1.1, 1.2 seconds. It jumps up even more now to 1.5x in Shell Oil. So
coming into that second half of the lap again, Scott, he just has that little speed advantage around this bit. I was just highlighting James here because he's had obviously got spun out in that first race, so he's had a really quite a good recovery drive to 6th, and again causing him all sorts of problems by talking about him. But yeah, he's had a great recovery drive and looks like he's going to finish solidly in top 10.
Does look that way inclined as he holds on. Rossetti still clinging on to a 3rd place and a podium finish to round out the season, but McMaster might have something to say about that if he closes any more in these last few moments of the race. Out now under Clay Hill and up over underneath the bridge and over the crest into Druids for the second to last time. Rossetti holding on to 3rd place. The gap is still 1.5, 1.6 seconds, so Černý has the measure of Rowe in the second half of a lap here. This is Tim Van Heel still chasing after Steve Arnell. Matthew Lewis in the background there, exploring the track limits a little bit too much. And he will come under threat if he's not careful, once again, from both Tom Willis, last year's Academy White Group champion, and also James Fowler, one of the other 2 drivers that joined him in the top 3 in the point standings. Across the line have gone the leaders to start the last lap of the season for the Caterham Academy Series here at caterhamracer.com. And we now see David Rowe has retired.
We've
What's
lost-
happened to David Rowe? Out of the race.
I wonder whether he got a penalty that he didn't serve or something along those lines. It was suspiciously like he was going over the line. If you don't serve a slowdown penalty for a cut, or you miss the fact that he was due to one, you can get pulled out of the race if you don't serve one within 3 laps.
Wow, that's a shame if that's the case. But David Rowe then out of the race, and 2 big names failing to finish in this season finale, so to speak. But now this is the scrap for second place is developing here. Steve McMaster, if he can try and close in enough to have an attack on this last lap, it'll be quite a feat to do so. The clock ticks down to 0 on my screen now, so the time has hit 0, and this will be the last lap of the race. And Jaroslav Černý is pretty much out and away to the tune of almost 4 seconds now, so he might be just taking it a little bit easy to get himself to the flag, but not too much to the fact that Rossetti and McMaster will be on his tail by the time they get to the line as they head into his slops. There is Černý, just in the white car in the front of shot, and here come Rossetti and McMaster. McMaster, you can see, just pushing as much as he dares in this final lap of the race. He has caught a couple of tenths. He's all the curb on the exit, but just taking a bit of grass there won't really help him too much. Tries to get a small toe if he can up the hill, but it might be too little too late as they come towards Druids for the final time, and he is going to try and close as much as he can. But up out of Druids, running a little wide there, but just about keeping it on the road, comes Jaroslav Černý. It's been a pretty instantaneous impact ever since he came in, and hopefully he will stick around for season 2, as I'm sure he will, if he's going to help with some work on the physics. But this just shows how competitive it's been. We're up to our 7th different winner in the final race of the season. Jaroslav Černý will pick up his first relay victory across both series. He will win the final race of the caterhamracer.com inaugural Caterham Academy Series. Second place goes to Rossetti, third goes to McMaster, another solid 4th for Guy Crawford, 5th for James Murphy, 6th for Chris Skillicorn, and then Van Heat, Arnell, Matthew Lewis battling back to 9th, and Tom Willis rounding out the top 10. James Fowler should be back in 11th place, but he will be coming across with Mark Bennett anytime. In fact, he has already come across the line in 11th place. So we're still waiting for Mark Bennett, who comes across the line now. And just the rest of the cavalry up across to take the flag. Glenn McConaughey and Alan Curtis, Paul Fernerhuff and Andy Steele coming through to be the last man across the line. And sadly we lost David Rowe and Harry Senior. So there is the final result of the series, and Jaroslav Černý picks up the victory by almost 4 seconds in the end to make it our 7th different winner. 2 new winners in one night. How about that? Well, Rossetti, the man who won the first race, is second, and he holds off Steve McMaster by just over a second from Guy Crawford in 4th position. Very good in the last few rounds of the season. He could be one to watch in season 2 if he comes back for more. James Murphy with the top 5, and what's been a very different up and down season for him. Hasn't been able to pick up a win in the Academy, but maybe next time. Chris Skillicorn 6th, Tim Van Hees 7th, and Steve Arnell. Matthew Lewis, who's won several times, of course, and had to settle with a top 10 finish just ahead of Tom Willis. And then the rest of the order from 11th downwards, James Fowler, Mark Bennett, Glenn McConaughey, who could be a podium finisher if he can get the hands of the Academy car. Then Alan Curtis, Paul Fernerhuff and Andy Steele. And then sadly, the 2 cars that didn't make it to the end for whatever reason, or Harry Senior, I think, had the incident earlier on. David Rowe, we suspect, was a penalty, but he was technically classified 17th, even though he retired in the last couple of laps. And that, unfortunately, Chris, before we have a chat to our drivers, is that's it. The racing's done for the time being. Of course, it definitely will be back, but that closes out what's been a very entertaining Caterham Academy Series from start to finish, and one I think that certainly has done its job no end to keep the drivers entertained and in match fitness before the season starts. And I guess now the question is, I guess we'll get to the point now we have to start thinking about season 2 when we do it all over again, and in what format it takes as well.
Yeah, so obviously coming up next is the final round, obviously the 420. But yes, we are deciding currently what is to happen for season 2. So we've got big plans. So keep an eye out and listen ears to the ground, and we'll make that announcement relatively soon.
Excellent stuff. So there is one more race to go, as you can see. On Friday, the last race of the series for the Caterham 420R Race Series, Oulton Park on the National Circuit. That should be an epic one. That always produces great races from Caterham. Once again, 5th of June on this Friday at 8:20. Do we have time to talk to anyone, or are we pretty much sorted for our final broadcast? What do you think, Chris?
I think we should try and drag in someone who who should we get? I wonder. Will Rossetti's showing us not having a mic, so I don't think we're going to be able to speak to him. He's done a great job, and I haven't got the other winners. We could certainly speak to David Rowe to find out whether it was an issue there on the last lap with penalty, maybe.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, if you want to quiz him on that, then far away, drag him in. Let's see what he's got to say.
Hey, David, have you got us in the commentary box?
Yes, I can hear you.
We just wanted to know whether that was a penalty, because it all looked really good for a solid podium in the final round of this championship, but you kind of seemed to disappear.
It was some kind of technical glitch. I disappeared to the menu screen, basically. I have no idea what happened, so it was a bit of a shame.
Yeah, it looked good up until that point. It did look like you weren't able to quite drag back Cherney in the lead there, though.
No, I didn't have the pace with Cherney, and to be fair, I haven't had the pace throughout the whole all of the sessions, so I was quite delighted to be actually on the podium. I kind of did a James Murphy where I was just trying to kind of behave a little bit and not get tied up into too much trouble, so I guess it paid off, and a bit of luck as well.
Yeah, great job. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next series. Are you out in the 420s on Friday?
Yeah, I'll be there, definitely. Look forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
Good stuff. So, I think, does that bring the Academy Series Season 1 to a close, I think, Chris? And what's been a very entertaining sort of project to be a part of. I think, from my point of view, it's been good to keep my hand in commentating on Caterham's in the virtual world and get back into sim racing commentary, which is where I started back in 2012, and of course has progressed now to the point where sort of Caterham Motorsport have me as their sort of unofficial quote-unquote championship commentator to go around to as many of their meetings as possible and commentate for the circuits. And it's a form of racing I've always loved ever since I discovered it back in, I think it was April 2014, I think it was, and it was a BRSCC race weekend at Snetterton. I was covering it for Downforce Radio, and the train of Caterhams that came past, sweeping past the pit straight, about 12 of them all at once. I fell in love with the racing ever since, and so these guys have put on just as great a show as the real ones do. And I think you can agree, Chris, if this hasn't got them ready, at least, well, partially ready at least, to deal with any racecraft when we get racing, at least for the Academy in July here at Oulton Park, and then for the rest of the field at Cadwell Park at the beginning of August, then I'm not quite sure what will.
Yeah, no, it's great practice, as we've mentioned a few times on our stream. It's all real psychology, you know, they're real racing drivers in the seats of these cars, trying all the tricks of the trade just as you would in real life. So it's great, especially for the Academy guys, to sort of get a feel for what it's like to run close ahead of time. It's one of the skills you build up over time, and to get a little bit of pre-practice is good news for them. And hopefully we'll see them doing really well in the real season that's coming up in probably just over a month's time, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the big question now is, do we start offering points? Because it makes it a bit more competitive then. But that's the tricky one. Do we keep it as a kind of a non-point scoring series only? I guess that's a discussion among many.
To keep your ear to the ground as well. We'll have those discussions over the next coming days, and we will make sure that we fully keep everyone involved with that process. Yeah.
Good stuff. Excellent. Well, just a reminder, of course, the last racing of the current season across both series is going to be on Friday, the finale of the Caterham 420R Race Series on Friday, 5th of June, same time, 20 past 8. We'll have the second Grid B race, and of course, whoever wins that will be onto the back of the grid for the final two races. Donington Park on the national circuit's been the scene of so many season deciders in real life in Caterham. It's produced so many nail-biters. And I'm sure, even though there's no championship on the line, they'll certainly be pushing hard as much as possible. Again, thank you so much for watching this caterhamracer.com Academy Series. If you want to find out more, do head to caterhamracer.com and get in touch with Chris and find out if you're a Caterham racer or just someone who maybe wants to take part. Then by all means, check it out. Go check out the website. Go check out all the previous Academy Race broadcasts that we've done all throughout the season. And be sure to join us on Friday. But from myself, Scott, and Chris, and everyone who takes part, thank you very much for watching and supporting it. And do join us on Friday for that final 420R race. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week. And we'll see you then. Bye for now.
Goodbye.